Hi, folks. Today I wanted to talk to you about a vote that you might have heard about a few weeks ago, a hotly contested vote in which Vancouver City Council decided to maintain its prohibition on gas heating in new homes. I want to share a little bit with you about how that happened and draw some lessons from that experience moving forward for those of us in the climate movement. So the first thing to say about this vote is that it was not easy. It was uncomfortably close. But a couple of weeks ago, the gas industry's effort to reintroduce fossil fuel heating in new homes and buildings in Vancouver was mercifully defeated. Turns out that mobilization, even against powerful vested interests, can still win the day. Now, let's be clear. Mobilizing to confront the climate emergency desperately requires forward momentum. Instead, thanks to the unrelenting persistence of the fossil fuel industry, countless Vancouver area climate activists and organizations just spent untold hours over the last 4 months re-prosecuting a fight they had already won. And so that's very unfortunate, but it was necessary. Just to give you a little context, so under Vancouver's Climate Emergency Action Plan, new buildings in the city have not been permitted to use fossil fuels for space and water heating since early 2022. This was a nationally precedent-setting policy, and it was widely seen as a beacon of genuine climate emergency action. But in a surprise move last July, Mayor Ken Sim and some of his center-right councillors moved to re-allow gas in new homes, and they gave staff until this fall to come back with a new policy that would be gas-friendly. The local climate movement quickly sprung into action, and because people really understood that the burning of so-called natural gas in buildings currently accounts for about 55% of Vancouver's local greenhouse gas emissions. And so people were intent on defending this flagship climate policy. And so people started to mobilize, and there were letter writing campaigns to the mayor and council that were initiated by Stand.Earth and Dogwood and the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, or CAPE, student climate groups, For Our Kids, the Davis Suzuki Foundation, Women Transforming Cities, others. I mean, it was fantastic to see. Under the coordination of the Zero Emission Innovation Center, green builders got organized and started to push back. And there was also this terrific coalition of progressive businesses that wrote to the mayor and council urging a rethink. The national moderator of the United Church, Reverend Carmen Lansdowne, joined with Anglican Bishop John Stevens and made a joint appeal to city councilors, imploring them not to take the city backwards. They wrote, both our churches are actively involved in converting how we heat our buildings. We urgently need our elected leaders to make this task easier, not more difficult. And under the auspices of CAPE, nearly 150 health professionals wrote to mayor and council urging a reconsideration, explaining relying on gas, renewable or otherwise, in new buildings is not just an outdated approach, but also a dangerous one. Gas appliances in homes release pollutants indoors and outdoors, such as nitrogen dioxide and benzene, both of which are harmful to human health. At a rally outside Vancouver City Hall the day before these proceedings began, organized by For Our Kids, UBC professor and filmmaker Avi Lewis, who is also my brother-in-law, spoke to the crowd, and he said, here in Vancouver, we can still be a beacon of light and clean air and clean skies and clean buildings and homes, cozy in the winter, cool in the summer. We don't need methane gas in buildings. We need heat pumps for all. Of course, the gas industry and its front groups were also organizing too. Fortis BC, the BC gas provider, has been rather low profile through all of this, but their fingerprints are everywhere. And the gas company's own submission to City Council, they really revealed their true colors, which is full and unimpeded access for gas in buildings. But much of the more public lobbying has been done by industry front groups, such as Resource Works, this advocacy group for British Columbia's extractive industries, and the Canadian coalition, excuse me, the BC coalition for Affordable and Dependable Energy, or BCCADE, which is a lobby association that has brought together gas suppliers and some in the restaurant industry and a few unions and some local business associations. And in the days just before the Vancouver vote, BCCADE and the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade jointly released this poll that purported to show Vancouver residents opposed to a ban on natural gas, with a very flawed and misleading question that conveniently failed to mention that the ban only applied to new buildings. And so people understandably understood the question to be about existing homes that they already had. And so it's not particularly surprising that people didn't want to be forced to retrofit their existing homes. But the gas industry pushback hasn't occurred only in Vancouver. The same industry coalition also recently tried to get the suburb of Richmond to reverse its decision to prohibit gas in new buildings. Thankfully, that was narrowly rejected last month, for now anyway. We've seen the same efforts in Ontario. We've seen it south of the border, this pushback in Washington State. But back to Vancouver. The Vancouver vote started with a presentation from the city's own sustainable SAF team, and they offered this detailed report and disputed all the assertions made by the mayor and his pro-gas councillors that re-allowing gas was needed to enhance affordability or to speed up construction. The staff research found that allowing gas back into new buildings would have, quote, no meaningful impact on affordability, and that conversely, going all electric now would spare homeowners very costly retrofits down the road. And significantly, the city staff warned, on the other hand, that reintroducing gas would be a massive step backwards in terms of the city meeting its greenhouse gas reduction goals, increasing carbon pollution by the equivalent of adding 16,000 cars to the road. At one point during the debate, in an episode that managed to be, I would say, simultaneously high comedy and tragedy, Councillor Montague, who had introduced the motion back in the fall, to reallow gas, who's a former police officer, by the way, he raised a point of order objecting to the fact that the Green councillors, Pete Fry and Adrian Carr, had these anti-gas posters displayed on their desks. Montague called the posters intimidating to some of the speakers. To be clear, the offending signs were in fact colorful posters made by elementary school children with messages like "Save our only Earth" and "Keep our homes fossil free." The mayor agreed that the posters could be intimidating and asked the Greens to remove them, and they reluctantly did that. 142 speakers signed up to address council on this matter, so many that the deliberations extended into a second full day and evening. There were a few speakers who spoke on behalf of the gas industry, but the speakers were overwhelmingly against having gas back in new buildings by a margin of 91 to 13. There was a few no-shows. I wish I could quote them at length, just to say the speakers were extremely well informed and compelling and systematically debunked the arguments put forward by the gas industry. Many referred to the more than 600 British Columbians who perished during the extreme heat dome event of June 2021, noting that electric heat pump systems would have provided summer cooling that would have kept those people alive. And in a really welcome development, a large number of the speakers were from the building industry, insisting that they know how to build just as quickly and cheaply, if not more so, without gas. And after hours of these presentations, it was finally time to vote. The Mayor Sim, in a rather tortured final statement, stuck by his summer decision based largely on the rather sad premise that what Vancouver does doesn't matter in the larger world. And so he said, I'm going to support natural gas. As expected, the two Green councillors, Carr and Fry, opposed re-allowing gas. But the really surprising piece here were three councillors from the mayor's own ABC party who joined them, and really, I think, deserve kudos for their bravery. Lisa Dominato, Peter Meisner, and most notably Rebecca Bly, who had voted for re-allowing the gas in July, but in recent weeks had signaled her second thoughts. She expressed disappointment that the July amendment happened without expert or community advice and had consequently been based on incorrect information. She said, I believe we made the wrong decision in July. And she also said, I've heard from young people who expressed disappointment with the July decision, all of which led her to conclude that the city needed to continue its climate leadership. And in the end, the recommendation to reallow gas was a 5-5 tie, which according to procedural rules means the proposal is defeated. And so we pushed it back. But what are we supposed to learn from this 4-month ordeal? On the positive side, we learned that the climate movement is robust, and it's not going to take these rollbacks lying down. Well, if you're a conservative city councillor, you learned a hard lesson from this experience, which is that you're going to have to, you're going to pay a political price. And if nothing else, you're going to have to sit through 2 days of public speakers if and when you choose to reopen a matter like this. And I think we also learned that as we face the prospect of full-on climate deniers in national leadership in both the US and Canada, this Vancouver experience offers a telling and hopeful reminder that it is possible to split the center-right vote as we struggle to hold on to past climate wins. But the episode also drives home that the gas industry pushback is never going to stop. Whether through their direct efforts or via the proxy use of front groups like BC CAID and the Board of Trade, the fossil fuel industry will never take no for an answer. And it's going to keep revisiting this matter with individual municipalities, one at a time, until such time as the provincial or federal government takes everyone out of this misery and simply makes it the law of the land that new buildings can't tie into gas lines. And then we can all get to work on the longer term and harder task of phasing gas out of existing homes and buildings. But for now, it's worth savoring a rare climate victory.